Welcome to the UpStreamLife.com. I am Vishal Krishna, the founder and editor. Continuing with our series on impact in education, we are going to discuss today how Gyan Shala and Pratham InfoTech Foundation have worked with the British Asian Trust to improve learning outcomes for 200K students. 5 years ago, the British Asian Trust launched the Quality Education India Development Impact Bond, an innovative results-based funding mechanism which aimed to improve learning outcomes for primary school children. Launched in 2018, the $11 million fund is the world's largest education impact bond and ran for 4 years. It was supported by an international coalition of private and not-for-profit sector organizations. So we are here to discuss how Gyan Shala and Pratham InfoTech Foundation achieved these outcomes and impact. For me, development of an economy can happen when its children have meaningful learning, which results in making them go into higher learning, and later they become entrepreneurs or employees, which is what I've done for the last 20 years. Look at kids going into higher education and then become employable. So I have with me Mr. Pankaj Jain, the CEO of Gyan Shala, and Mr. Prem Yadav, the CEO of Pratham InfoTech Foundation. A little bit about my guests today. Pankaj started Gyan Shala to answer a question: why has Bangladesh moved ahead in the poor girls' education segment while India is not? He's going to tell us if India has in fact moved the needle in terms of impact in education, especially for girl children also. Gyan Shala provides cost-effective learning solutions for quality school education for children from poor families. They have, by the way, touched the lives of more than 600K students. Prem, on the other hand, is, like I said, is the CEO and co-founder of Pratham InfoTech Foundation. It is a non-profit organization that works in India to bridge the digital divide, and they facilitate the adoption of information technologies in education and equip disadvantaged youth with skills, tools, and capabilities that the new world economy or global economy demands. They have directly touched the lives of 1 million students. So, combination of these two partners of the British Asian Trust, they have impacted more than 2 million lives. Okay, and that's real impact, ladies and gentlemen. So let me welcome my guests today. So how are you, Pankaj? How are you, Prem? How are you? How are you guys? I really feel proud that I'm meeting two people who are in the thick of things when it comes to education and making children really, become or blossom. Today, I think our children are the future, and you've touched their lives. I'm honored to have you. How are you?
All good. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and look forward to talking to you.
Prem, how are you?
I'm doing well, Vishal. Thank you to having me. Thank you. Look forward.
Okay. Now, here's how I'll begin. I just want the early questions, the easier ones, which is, Pankaj, I'll start off with you. Why has Gyan Shala, been there for the last few decades, going out there? What was the genesis of the idea, Pankaj, and how far has Gyan Shala come?
Well, see, journey started, of course, with the realization that the Bangladesh girls had gone ahead of Indian girls, particularly from the poor families, in the education. But in '95, I also was invited by the government of India to become a member of a committee which was looking into one of the then largest education intervention, which was funded by the UK government and implemented in Andhra Pradesh state. Now, this project was one of the very well designed, even by the modern standard of 2023, well funded by the UK and relatively better implemented for a government program. But the results were still very modest. So it really left me with my kind of research and academic background. It raised a question in my mind why we have a well designed, well funded, implemented program leading to poor results. And it is that try to finding an answer to that. It really led to setting of the Gyan Shala, whose aim is essentially to find out what is the right way for children to learn well in India, given our systemic constraints, and then how can that process be scaled up on a very, very large scale. So that has been the Gyan Shala's journey. While we were trying to find out an answer, we discovered that the practical way to move forward in Indian resource constraints was to adopt what we'll call currently as a structured pedagogy approach. It essentially, doing away with that jargon, essentially means it tries to simplify the role of teacher to their skill level and their capability level. and not expect teachers to do some all kind of wonders, which many of us expect teacher to do it. For example, not many people realize that our expectation from the school teacher probably is equivalent to four expectation from the four professors of a degree college or the higher education. Now, this is not something which can be doable. So what we needed to do is to find a solution of running the school system in a manner that an average ordinary teacher can still help children acquire high learning levels. And we found structured pedagogy is a major part of that solution. Unfortunately, most of the education thinkers were against and are still against the concept of structured pedagogy because they feel that this means de-skilling the teacher. While what our argument was that we don't believe de-skilling teacher, but we recognize what is the actual level of skill and capability and try to structure the task in a manner which matches their capability. So this was the starting point of our journey. Over 2 decades, we have sort of educated more than 300,000 children in our own program. And one of the disciplines we started following was to get our children tested by some of the most prestigious Indian and international organizations. And fortunately, our children have done proud by and we educate only slum children coming from the families where the family cannot provide any educational support. And even such children are able to match the performance of the children from so-called elite schools where there's a long queue of people trying to seek admission.
That's a beautiful journey. That's a beautiful journey. I also want to bring Prem in, sir. I want to talk deeper with you, Pankaj sir, about the pedagogy, the structured approach, and why we can't expect a lot from our teachers, even in junior school or primary school. And we have the expectations of a college professor, which I really want to dig into that. But I want to bring in Prem here. Prem, tell us a little bit about what you've done and what the Pratham InfoTech Foundation has done. And I'd also want to note that you could perhaps also give us some data points like Mr. Pankaj provided.
Yeah, so let me start with how we started our journey. In the summer of 1998, there was a Pratham Education Foundation board meeting was happening in the conference room of ICICI Bank because they have provided us the place. And that time, Mr. Waghul was our Pratham chairman. So he and also his colleague, Mr. Kamath, they actually offered us phasing out about 200 used 486 computer, and there was also 386 computer. And they offered this and suggested that they would give this 200 used machine to explore ways to leapfrog into 21st century. And actually, we as a Pratham took up the challenge because only 2 people were at that time using computer, all Pratham network. So we took up as a challenge and established 15 information technology means computer center with collaboration of Mumbai Municipal School and introduce computer aided learning program. This is how education technology project came into being. And in 2004, Pratham InfoTech Foundation emerged as a separate entity. The idea was to actually, as you mentioned in the introduction, how can we give access to technology to the masses, mostly those who are actually children attending government school. Also, if we wanted to test out whether technology can help children in their improve their learning level, and at the same time, so because in late 2000, early 2000, technology was not affordable, so we wanted to test out whether it can become like every household, or at least not household, but at least a school level, every child will get technology to improve their learning level. So that was the journey we started with, and very simple thing, bridging the digital device, the aim that you provide access. And also the second aim was to how can we adopt technology in day-to-day education.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic introduction from both of you. I it's sets the context on what I wanted to ask. And for me, India is such a vast country, complexities. Prem, Pankaj, you're slightly older than I am, so you know more about the complexities and the experience. My subjective experience, I'll bring it in, and I want you to highlight these problems, because both of you looked at children in government schools, probably children in slums, like Mr. Pankaj referred to. I have tried my lifetime to put kids into school, especially at the lower income levels. Most of them seem to drop out at 14. And even if you pay them to go to school, they don't want to go to school. That was a personal problem that I faced. I don't know why that happens. So I want to start off with you, Pankaj sir, and Prem. You can add in also. What are some of the challenges for a country like India? It's so complex. You have to highlight what are some of these perspectives that we need to add to change education.
Vishal bhai, I think my understanding of this sector is probably confined to the school education, not the secondary and higher education. Though I was a part of higher education system, but I have not really done any significant work to understand it better or improve it. So I'll limit my remarks basically to the school education.
Yes, let's limit it to school education. So that was my question. Why do kids drop out? And my thesis was, even if I want to get a 13-year-old back to school, they don't want to go back to school, especially slum children. I want to understand that better from your experience. And Prem, you can also add in, and I'll ask you some questions too.
I believe that as far as the school education, let's say up to grade 8, or let's say up to age of around 14, 15, I think children will drop out mainly almost 90% cases because they are not getting much from the school. And after some time, they find that what are the advantages going to the school from which they are not getting much. Probably in 5 to 10% cases, there are social economic factors. I'm not talking at the moment, let's say some girls from some conservative families where the families do not want girls to go beyond. They let's say outside the community to get education. So there's one group, obviously, when the parents don't allow girls to go. So they will obviously have to drop out. But other than that, I would say maybe 5 to 10% children, because of the economic pressure to earn or whatever, they might drop out, but most others will drop out because they are not finding much value in attending the school. So if one can ensure reasonably good quality of the schooling within the time available to them, and I believe 3 to 4 hours are good enough for a child to achieve the mastery of the school level learning. And if that can be ensured that in a reasonable environment, which is non-threatening, which is not, there is not a penalty or problems there, I would tend to believe that the children will continue, because actually learning can be fun and it is not a painful. And there's obviously this social group and the forming of their friends, etc. So there is absolutely no reason why a child will drop out, as long as some basic things are ensured: quality, a non-threatening environment, and non-penalizing environment. That's the only thing.
What do you mean by non-paralyzing, sir?
Well, yeah, suppose there is a environment where child is sort of, let's say, physically troubled or sort of penalized for not doing expected thing, whatever that may be. Expectation could be behaviorally, it could be not learning fast enough as per teacher expectation, whoever. So there's I mean that non-threatening environment, or an environment which will nurture time which child takes to learn. At times every child does not learn at the same pace. So you should give the time and not reject a child just because he or she is taking a little bit of time, and not start penalizing or excluding him or her from the learning process. So it is in that sense, I meant that environment should be conducive to children continuing to stay in the classroom.
Okay, you're saying that today there is an intent to go to school, that every child will go to school, but it is making it fun that is the most difficult part. And that makes total sense. How do we fix that? How do we make it fun?
I would say,
if you look at all the government schools, the students.
No, I would say, I think this fun is a mistaken word. It should be pleasant, and
it should be pleasant.
Nothing is more pleasant than learning. To feel that, see the feeling of empowerment which comes out of learning is bigger than any fun. So I'm not sure that the fun is the right part, because sometimes that phrase takes you in a wrong kind of direction, where fun becomes the objective. But Just fun alone will
Absolutely.
not keep the interest of the child. Of course, they can have enough fun on the street also, for that matter. I think
Absolutely.
the satisfaction or the pleasure which comes out of learning will retain children in the class. So first priority is that the class experience must lead for them experientially that they are learning something. And of course, it must be non-fit. So these are the only 2-3 things which are required.
Where are we in terms of classroom experience, sir?
So what we have found out that there are 2 or 3 things regarding the classroom experience. Number one, class, for example, the kind of a classes we run, we make sure that there are, we don't, for example, make any child sit on the class and try to sit on the floor and try to then make do with whatever is happening in the class. Because see, every human being requires some facility, for example, to write. Now it's very difficult for you to write if you're sitting on the floor, bending on a floor which is not smooth, and to write on the page, you just cannot do it. So you have to provide certain basic facilities to be functional in the classroom, both in terms of to be able to do some work which you expect child to do, and to be able to interact with the teacher and the other children in a meaningful manner. So certain physical facilities have to be provided. Then, of course, very important that whatever interaction which you organize with a child in the classroom, and especially there are 3 kind of interaction takes place in the classroom. Number one, interaction between child and the teacher. Second, between child and other children. And third, child with the learning material. And all these 3 things have to be very carefully structured in a manner that on the primary thing that it leads to some learning, as even child can experience that I am learning something. Second, and it is not a easy thing, to be honest. It takes some skill, some understanding of how does child's mind actually engages with the various learning tasks. For example, the way child's mind deals with the language is you need to understand, then only child will learn. Similarly, how you want child eventually in mathematics to learn about deductive thinking. And I'm not talking logic, I'm using deductive thinking. See, every human being has that capacity. Similarly, child has an inductive making some conclusion on the basis of observation, which is about scientific thinking. So one need the designer of the class processes, the class dynamics ought to understand how does human mind deals with this, let's say, language, with deductive thought, inductive thought, whatever we call, let's say, subject. And keeping that in mind, plus the human nature, plus the kind of facilities which are required, then if you organize all these things, then such class processes will lead to effective outcome. And of course, then you also have to make sure that the teachers can conduct those class processes within their own constraint of capability as well as the resources.
No, brilliantly said, sir. I will get in the details of it some more in a bit. Let's hear it from Mr. Prem. And Prem, I think sir said it very rightly. You got to make it pleasant. You got to make sure that it's interactive. We need to have deductive learning, and we should enable that. I want to get into where we are at that in a bit. But from your experience in terms of making sure that kids use tools, kids understand IT, what has your experience been, and what are some of the key challenges and opportunities going?
So before coming to your point, I wanted to give some data point. Pratham work started in 1994, and that time the major challenge was what we have seen, and that is how our mission started, that every child in school and learning well. So every child in school, that was the major issue everybody was facing, even as a country we were facing. Currently, there is a ASER report coming last 15 years, and it says that 98.5% children are enrolled in school. It means only 1.5% children are out of the school. So that is as a country, we have achieved a major thing, that we bring children in the school and they are now in classroom. And we all are trying to working on the second part, every child in school and now learning well. And this is where we found everybody is actually facing a challenge. How the second data point I wanted to share with you, like as an India level, before before pandemic data, so about 44% children in government school in class 5 could read a class 2 level text. So about 50% children, those who are attending school more than 50% children are not able to read. Even they are in the class 5 and they're not able to read class 2 text. So it is very, even they spend 5 years of their schooling time and they're not able to reach
It is
at
a
that
little
level.
alarming. It is alarming. I
It's
agree.
very alarming, and we have to think about the model as a government, as a very civil society organization are trying to set. So there are a lot of actually experiment is happening, but we need something which actually needs something like a traditional way along with something new technology based or many things. So like Pankaj just told about the how can we actually engage children, those kind of thing. But this is, we need something on scale basis. So coming to your question, that we are trying to set up a model where the hybrid thing, it is not only technology, it is not only traditional thing. India is a big country. We need a solution which can actually bring together the technology and traditional thing together. And through that, if we can scale that model on every part of India, that can be a solution to actually bring this the achievement graph up to 100% level. Otherwise, and it is not, it will not take much time, but there is a no will we see at the government level or every level, whether it is a Nagar Panchayat, Jilla Parishad, or the municipal corporation, or as a state level. So there are bits and bits we are doing, but there is a no that everybody together come together and actually plan and track the children learning and create a strategy which can actually take up children at a certain level. We don't see that kind of will at all. So that's why the most of the children are lagging, but we need something. And these are the quality education India development impact bond. The models actually what we are trying to experiment is answer to actually this kind of the where the children are lagging. So I will talk about.
I will get back to the problems and opportunities in a bit, because since you brought up the bond, okay, let's talk about the quality education India development impact bond now. I mean, the program itself, I like the fact that over 4 years, it impacted 200K students. My thought process is this: what was your role? How did each of you impart that bond, and how is the bond the right way to impart kind of quality education, or how do you make impact with a bond? For me as a financial journalist, when I look at a bond, I look at it from financial terms, that there is a coupon rate, there's a yield, there's a return, but this is a completely new way of innovative way of funding education. So we could perhaps start off with what the bond is from both your perspectives, and then we will go on to how did this program work and what was your role and what was your personal opinion on the impact made. These are the three things that I want. Pankaj, I'll start with you.
Well, as you rightly said, bond is essentially financing mechanism. It has nothing to do with the education per se. So by responding about the issue of bond, essentially we talk about the financing and not the education. So far we were talking about the education processes, but the question that you are raising is a different field altogether. Now, obviously, any activity requires resources, and how these resources are provided, and what are the, let's say, discipline imposed while providing the resources becomes a way of structuring both the work as well as the incentive, how it will be sort of handled in future. So the mechanism of providing resources has significant implication on the way the program is conducted, not necessarily the design of the program. So as far as the design of learning process is concerned, it did not change for us just because it is a development impact bond. Of course, because learning takes place in a certain manner, whether it is funded to the development impact bond by grant, by the government fund, it just doesn't matter. So now, if we are talking about the financing, I would say the way development impact bond was structured, two aspects were very clear. Number one, it emphasized codified learning outcomes which we were expected to conform to. Now, they were broadly in line with what is the state curriculum or the national curriculum or the curriculum that we were following in various states. Let's say we were funded for Gujarat, so we were following by and large Gujarat state curriculum, but in a manner adopted by our approach to what we found most effective. But then we got a agreed list of learning outcome as a part of the agreement of the DIB. And therefore, we had to make slight modification in the way our curriculum was phased out over time. So that was first kind of a negotiation or understanding of what is required if we want to conform to in the bond format. Arrange, conform to those learning outcome expectations, which are set out as a part of the agreement. Second thing, which was different from our traditional way of working, was that a certain amount of process monitoring elements were built in as a part of the agreement. Now, we used to monitor those processes. Our internal mechanisms often were informal, but participation in this bond or this agreement required us to formalize that. So that was the second kind of a thing. Both negotiations about how to measure those processes to how much time can go, because any measurement takes effort and money. So how much time can, of particularly the teachers in the class or our people in the class, we want them to teach and not really spend time documenting the process. So we had to negotiate what is the right way of monitoring the process so that it enriches the process and does not come in the way of conducting the process. So these two aspects, organizing or arranging our work a little bit to the exact agreed learning outcome, and second, the monitoring of the process were the two additional elements which were added because it was a development bond kind of a financing. Third thing, I would also say that the testing itself raises many sort of issues, because once you have an independent tester, he or she comes with her framework, which some of which you understand being in this field, but some are unique to each organization. And it took quite some time, both for the tester as well as us, to really come on the common platform so that we can work together. So I would say these three aspects were very significant part of impact of one mechanism of funding on the way we normally implemented our program.
What did you find? What are some of the learnings, sir? I mean, 4 years, what is the impact made? What did you find? What so let's say you had to change some of the processes. There was an external auditor or somebody measuring this also. So for me, my biggest concern is, why did it last only 4 years, right? It can also exceed 4 years. I asked Abba that, in fact, and I hope there are more such programs. What were the outcomes in 4 years for you, sir?
Well, I'll just address this issue of 4 years. I think she had money only to support you for 4 years. If she had money for 10 years, she will do it for 10 years. Okay. Now, you see, what was as part of the agreement was that there was to be let's say, a comparative sample group. So they were funding our program, which was an intervention. Plus, we were also supposed to compare the performance of our children participating in this program compared to some reference group and what they had chosen. Ideally, it could have been either the school children going to the government school or to go to the low-cost private school, because that is the kind of profile with which our children come from. Now, we couldn't get an agreement for the government to agree that they would like to compare the performance of the children going to the government school with a program which is not a government. You can understand the kind of issues involved. So but we could get agreement of certain low-cost private school, and they were carefully chosen in a manner to, let's say, broadly represent somewhat similar kind of a socio-economic background. So by and large, it was a fact that the children who come to the Gyan Shala, they actually come from the poorer socio-economic background. And how we found out was that as a part of the testing, there was a baseline test conducted of Gyan Shala children as well as the children who were the comparison group with the private school children. So the target was that how much will be the progress of the child over a period of time. And they had set up some marks, let's say X percentage. It was expected that the Gyan Shala children should learn X percent more than the learning gains of the private school children. So that's the way they wanted to examine. And luckily for us, and mainly because of the credit of our children, the performance, they probably scored 300% more than what was expected for them to go ahead of the.
That's amazing. That's good to hear, sir. That's so good.
Yeah. So that was probably the experience. So they were tested every year, and every year a baseline would be conducted or taken for Gyan Shala children as well as the private school children, and they say how much progress has been made and how the two progresses compare with each other. And lucky that progress every time was 2 to 3 times, or 2 to 300% more than the target which was set up as a reasonable target.
Fantastic. And you measured them in what, mathematics, addition, subtraction, or normal understanding of literature, some form of reading, Marathi, maybe Gujarati, maybe. That's how you measured them?
Yeah, it was conducted by one of the testing organization, fairly reputed, which was used by the British Asian Trust, chosen after from the various vendors, and they conducted the test of language, mathematics, and in higher grade what you call the EVS or science. And I would like to say one thing very clearly. Luckily, the way this testing was organized, it certainly went well beyond what is called just reading capacity, because we were not testing literacy, so to say, which is just coding, decoding. Not that you can convert a script into the sound. That was not the test. Test was read, understand, comprehend, and that answer, which is the language understanding. So it was not a test of so-called literacy. It was actually a test of understanding, which you derive by comprehending the text which has been presented to you. I mean, obviously, the levels is different, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. But it goes much beyond just literacy and numeracy, the kind of a thing which Prem Bhai was saying, that grade 5 children cannot even read the text. It essentially means that they really have a problem of even converting text into the sounds. But this test was certainly far more advanced.
Very well said. Well said. Prem sir, your experience of the bond, your understanding of the bond, and how did the program work for you and your role in it? So if you can actually go into details, I'd love to ask some more questions from your thoughts.
So actually, Pankaj Bhai already told about it is a financial tool. It is not about what we were doing on the ground about the education. But yeah, obviously target-based payment, a new kind of tool is emerging. And we were happy to be part of that experiment across among all 5-6 organizations. And so let me tell about what was our arrangement. We came in this project after a year, first in the second year of the program, and Pratham InfoTech Foundation and there is an organization called Educational Initiative. We actually came together, and it was the first time of our history partnering with the third organization, and it is not happening very easily in the NGO sector. People wanted to try themselves. So almost like 6 months we were discussing whether we wanted to go with Education Initiative or not. And finally, I and the current CEO of Education Initiative, Pranav, we sat together, defined where the role of Pratham InfoTech Foundation and what will be the role of Education Initiative. Actually, Education Initiative has came up with a platform called MindSpark, and we wanted to use that MindSpark platform among the different government schools. And the proposal what we prepared to this development impact bond was we tie up with the UP state government, and the idea was to pilot this initiative and to actually address the low enrollment rate and learning outcome. But as I mentioned, that low enrollment is now the matter of the past, but learning outcome is still everybody is working in the government school. So why UP? Because UP is India's most populous state, and with around 4 crore school children in the age of 0 to 8 years, which is 19% of the country's total school-going population as of 2018. And Lucknow is UP's most populous city, and as such is a good representative of the potential scale-up and replicable in the rest of country. That is why Lucknow was chosen as an area of intervention. In 2019, none of the government school within the intervention sample has any digital infrastructure, nor were these being provided by the other government, other NGOs, not government. under this intervention, learning lab were actually established. So like we set up around 20-25 computer in the one classroom, and that is how 55 government school in urban and semi-urban area were chosen and set up around with 1200 Chromebook is like a laptop. We set up 55 lab, and at the same time other 55 school were choosing for, so like a control group. So altogether 110 school were selected, and out of that 55 were a control school and 55 school was selected as a treatment school. And under this quality education and development impact bond, the clear assessment metrics to improve the performance tracking of the school and the student were actually developed, and that helped in early problem detection and also deploying the target solution that were informed by the, actually that there was a lot of data we very, as Pankaj said, very designing of the program, that baseline testing was happened. Every child baseline we were taking and the data collected, and based on that we have actually designed a program. And on a daily basis, the software I mentioned, MindSpark, help on a daily basis when the children were logging, and based on their learning level they can start their journey for education. And this directly impacted student learning outcome, and also the action we wanted to take on a daily basis in the school, whether it is a teacher or whether it is a Pratham volunteer. So though the children who are lagging in the day-to-day basis education, we were working with those children in a different way, where we have created a model where a group of children can come together, and the school teacher and the Pratham volunteer was helping them. So those were the model actually we are trying, and the target was, as I mentioned, that complete 20 hours of EdTech usage by annual in annual calendar. And initially we were also actually, it was difficult to create a schedule with the help of the teacher, the principal, and the school management, but we were able to actually convince them why it is important. And based on our initial engagement with the school, we were able to set up a mission mode. We call this Mission 35. So every child every day get at least 35 minutes with EdTech, and that helped us a lot to create a mission mode program and to achieve the target. So basically, we were working in the school, the target, the treatment school, the target was set every child every day get 35 minutes. At the same time, all school data were collected on the daily basis, because it's an EdTech program. So we were having that advantage, that collecting data on a daily basis, analyzing the schools, those were not able to perform well. So there was a top 5 and bottom 5 school were selected on a daily basis. And based on the top 5, we actually, the idea or the knowledge we were actually getting, we were sharing with the other schools on a daily basis. And basically that tracking of the data information we were generating through the program, that was helping us to actually improve the quality and also the operation of the program. And what we have gained, or children has gained through this program, as Pankaj mentioned, even in this EdTech program, we implemented mostly the target, the control school. The children actually able to read out from where they started at 9 scale point, whereas our program reached 45 scale point. So like 5x improvement through this program, what we have actually found. And this was the third party assessment of the program. So I believe the program, the MindSpark program we implemented on a scale that is now replicable on a scale any part of India. Even Niti Aayog has actually adopted this model, and they are replicating this in other part of India.
Okay. Quickly, I just want to know, because both of you mentioned 3x, 300% growth to 5x, like you said, 45 scale. This typically like deductive learning again, Pankaj sir, Prem sir. One is because you are talking about physical education, Prem's talking about using IT tools. Are you both on the same page when it says it's deductive learning actually that we are creating here as part of the learning process?
No, it's just not deductive. See, I don't know how much you are familiar with this issue, but let's say there is a particular way human mind deals with the language, which is not captured by deductive or inductive logic. It's just the language. Language has a very unique way of any human being acquiring the language. Actually, the word is called acquiring the language, not even learning the language. So language has a different kind of interaction with the human mind. Deductive thinking is one kind of, let's say, thinking which normally is most effectively practiced in the mathematics practice. Inductive way of thinking is most directly practiced in the scientific way of investigation, but of course it sort of cuts across various parts. So we are talking about knowledge development. It's not one particular deductive or inductive or language kind of a thing. So we are talking about eventually the development of human mind, at least on these three dimensions. But of course, it also has significant implications on behavioral. For example, you can't learn unless you have a certain amount of discipline in terms of engaging yourself or child. So if, let's say, if child's score is going up, chances are very high that other than what language or maths, what she has learned, she has also learned to be somewhat more disciplined than otherwise. She has learned how to interact with other children than otherwise. She has learned how to listen to the teacher than otherwise. So there are various things inbuilt in this process of learning. So we are talking about talking about how much has been the impact in terms of learning as it is measured by the standard tests. Of course, that is not the total measurement of all the learning in the mind of the child, but that's what it is.
Okay. Prem sir, you want to add anything? Because I have to ask Pankaj sir one more thing, but if you want to add something, you can right now.
Yeah, so very small thing, just wanted to share our experiment. So like, as I mentioned that the children, those who are lagging in their learning level. So this program is what we tried and experimented is adaptive learning. So like if I'm in grade 5, but while testing, doing baseline, if I'm at grade 2 level, I have to start with grade 2 level, even if I'm in standard 5. This is kind of one type of the classroom management. So like you are just imagine if you are in grade 5, but you are grade 2 level and the teacher is teaching grade 5 level, you are lost, right? So we have to, this is a very simple thing, very a classroom management, that kind of, and on a scale, if you think like 300 million children are in school, and if 50% children are lagging behind, so you can imagine what is happening in the classroom and what it's a major problem, and we have to resolve and solve those very quickly, and it is possible to actually resolve very easily. We have to have a management of classroom. So simply what I'm trying to mention, my point is we need a engagement of children on their learning level.
Okay, got it. Pankaj sir, you asked me a very right thing. I have two children, one 3-year-old and one only 3 months old. So I can tell you that the way you're putting it is, we went to school, we were taught, in a different era. When I went in the 80s and the 90s, it was a different era. And today I see kids with the mobile phones. I see even poorer families with mobile phones. It's very interesting that when I look at this, it's a socio-economic problem for me. On one level, I see the divide becoming larger, and you spoke about deductive, inductive. You also spoke about language. That's not the whole basis. You're talking about development of the mind, which is more important, which is what we need to address for children. You were right, and that is what's pleasant about learning. And COVID-19 did not help. 2 years, a lot of these children sat at home, especially the poorer families, worse, because they just didn't go to school. Suddenly they were promoted to third standard or fourth standard, and suddenly they lost interest in education. Like Mr. Prem said, instead of teaching a child who has stopped at second standard, you're teaching him fourth standard or fifth standard material, he will not progress. So it's a very interesting situation in India at this point of time for me personally. I wanted to ask you, how has COVID-19 changed things? As it put government schools in a very challenging position today, and that's why partners like you come in and help them? Or would you say that parents have to really intervene? And sometimes I look at people of poor families, parents themselves don't know. That's my second problem. But they give them mobile phones. I was shocked. Yesterday, I was walking down the road in Bangalore near a few restaurants. And, there are a lot of migrant workers who come into Bangalore, of course. And to keep their kids busy, they've given them mobile phones. It's a very interesting social change as a behavior. I'm not saying it's not positive. It's just escapism for me. If you look at all this, with the impact of COVID-19, migration, the penetration of technologies like smartphones with everybody, where does education stand today? I mean, this is a philosophical thought I have. If you can answer with both your experience, where are we heading? It'll be interesting for me, sir. Quickly, Pankaj sir, Prem sir. So over to you, Pankaj sir.
See, you are talking about learning, which is a much bigger thing than school education. See, school education has specific goals and specific objectives to be fulfilled, which certainly is a subset of the overall learning. And overall learning is a very complex process, involves interaction with the society and so on and so forth. I would tend to believe that having access to, for example, cell phone, or let's say richer experience of life, will not be negative in terms of the overall development of the human mind, as long as it does not distract from the basic of whatever the process. If, for example, it distracts you, let's say, from eating the food properly while paying attention to it, or if going to the school when you need to go to the school. I think addition of the cell phone would be positive, but it must not be at the cost of the basics of the life, which, for example, is structured learning in the school or structured life at home, interaction with the human interaction with the other children, etc., etc. Because you actually learn so much more by interacting with other children or other adults than by even, for example, school education. Not many of us probably think that in fact each one of us maybe learn more from the society, our parents, than what we learn from the school, at least in the lower grade classes. So that learning is absolutely critical. And as long as that learning is enriched, and not at the cost of the formal learning, either in the class or learning at home, I think it is a positive development.
Oh, that's good to hear. Prem sir, over to you.
So Vishal, I'm an optimistic person, but still, so there are 2-3 things we have to think about it. One is since as I mentioned, that 98.5% children are in school, the number is growing, but we don't have the skilled teacher actually to cater this the humongous, and this is a humongous task. The number is so big. And where is the technology is emerging as a disruptor that for example, the project we are discussing, we had in March 20 lockdown had started, and we were waiting like 2 months, 3 months, and then it went up to like a year long. And we started thinking in the month of November, how can we actually, the classes were shut and nobody was going to school, children was not coming, government was not allowing to anybody to actually visit the school. So what we tried to experiment, that we first actually collected data. About 12,000 students are enrolled in the program. Out of that, only 22% family have mobile phone, and out of 22, there was about mere 12 to 13% had a smartphone. But within 8 months, 8 to 10 months, the number went up to the 70%. Actually, you were right that and we were talking about the government school children, and the parent want to invest in the child education. They know the importance of education, and there is that's eagerness is about, but they don't have the how the children will be educated. They don't have that kind of the facility with them. They send their school in the children, but the school is not happening the way they want, the way we want. So I think this is a high time to think about how the school education. So there is a NEP is coming, new education policy, and other thing is coming. But we have to think whether the parents, those who are sending their children in the school, they are the schools are service provider. They are functioning well or not. So we have to think about how that school can become a village school, or so it's a government school. It's not no more village school. Earlier it was a village school. The Pankaj sir was telling there was children were learning in the school, but number were less. So we can actually manage those things. But the number is becoming big. So we have to actually come up with a solution where every child can be engaged and the classroom management happen the way we want. But this is not happening, and this is a sad part of the model we are. But the only thing that this technology, I believe that technology and the traditional way, if we can actually join together, so that can be a hybrid kind of learning can solve these issues.
I agree with both of you. And Pankaj sir said, as long as it doesn't become a distraction and takes away attention, I think we are on for something good. But yes, I hope people watching this, especially if people from the government are watching this, there are interventions that you have to make in classrooms. Can you include parents? Can you include partners like Pratham and Gyan Shala? That's the future. I think it's a collaborative approach to do this. I want to ask you two quick questions. I want to bring the girls into this. Because I think both of you would understand. I think that's Pankaj sir's pet peeve also. How's girls' school education improved, sir, in the primary, secondary education? What's happened with the DIB itself? What is your experience with girls? And Prem sir, also in your case, because you also helped a lot of schools in UP, I want to understand girls there and using IT, at the junior school level. It'll be very interesting to know this, both of you. Pankaj sir, over to you.
In our program, there are typically equal number of girls and boys. That has been our experience by and large. And girls have performed as well as the boys. There is not significant difference in terms of their learning capability, learning outcome, etc. Except, of course, in some limited number of cases, when the family is very conservative, they do not want a girl to go forward beyond certain level. Other than that, they are on par. So it's more of a social problem than the school.
That's fantastic to hear, sir. That's fantastic to hear. So have we beaten Bangladesh yet?
No, not at all. We are behind, and that is the reason. See, the Bangladesh has already the per capita income is on par with India, mainly because they invest in the girls' education 25 years earlier, or they succeeded it. It's not that we have been investing more money than Bangladesh on education forever, but Bangladesh found out a solution. And they were ahead of us 25 years earlier. And therefore, now Bangladesh is on par with the per capita income. Certainly, other girls, they are better than India.
Great to hear.
Money is not enough. You have to succeed in using the money to get the outcome that you want. So I don't think our problem is that not spending money. Our problem is not getting the result that we expect out of the money that we are spending on it.
Got it. Prem sir, go on.
So Vishal, I second the thought what Pankaj just mentioned. That's the equal number of the percentage of the children, the boys or girls, they're attending the school, and basically even for technology part, the parent are sharing the mobile phone, whether it is a boy or girl. That is, we don't find any discrimination at that part, and for learning level of the boys or boys versus girl, we found out girls are doing well than the boys. That is what we actually found in our experiment. So I'm also happy if that is happening, and we will beat Bangladesh very quickly.
That's interesting. Okay, now my final questions to both of you. Do we need more instruments like the Development Impact Bond to be introduced in India? Do you think that's the best way to solve some of the challenges that we've spoken in this podcast? What are your thoughts, both of you, Pankaj sir?
I think it is a fundamentally a desirable thing where you want to give money based upon the result and not based upon the promises, which may not be kept in future. So in principle, it is a good thing to do it on a large scale. I think if we have to solve some problem, for example, testing on a large scale, which is cost effective. Second thing, we'll have to do it that testing is not an easy thing, incidentally, in field of education, because what is happening in the mind is not easy to measure. So it's actually is a complex problem to be solved. To solve in a manner which is cost effective and agreed by all the stakeholders. Second thing is that the way the DIP was structured in a certain kind of a context, and I would say it was relatively complex structure and is a costly structure to implement as well as run the program. So we'll have to find out relatively simpler and a less expensive mechanism of implementing this idea of linking performance with the payment.
No,
It is a
fantastic.
good idea, and I think
Fantastic.
it is.
It's a good idea, is it, sir? Is it a good idea, though, to do some kind of a bond?
It is a inherently good idea, but you have to solve many problems. Like anything, when you want to work on a scale, it poses different kind of challenges, and you have to solve different kind of problems. So the problem which has been solved by, let's say, British Asian Trust in handling this bond are very different if it has to be done even, let's say, 10 times bigger. And if you want to do 100 times bigger, even that will be very small part of India. There's a different ball game.
I will do a separate podcast on those challenges if you scale it. I am definitely going to call you both to my studio for sure. Prem, sir, you have to tell us in closing, what do you think about financial structures of that, like the bond, like the DIP, like a development impact bond? Do we need more? Same question I'm going to pose to you. Can it solve everything for us? And like Pankaj said, the scale and complexity is different. So we need to have a better way of measuring it. But what are your thoughts?
So I will go with this development impact bond, the idea. Only thing, the implementation part, as Pankaj ji mentioned, that we have to think about when we are going on the scale. So the model, the design, we have to rethink because obviously we were doing on a smaller scale. And replication on a bigger scale, like as a country, India, it required a lot of design thinking, and also how can we actually involve the government system, because actually we wanted to see the government system works. So these kind of the tools actually, so like the payment is based on the impact you create and the target you achieve. So and there's a third party who come and they actually taste and give the result and everything they taste, and then the tracking system is available. But on a scale, I'm also seconding the thought what Pankaj ji mentioned, that we have to give a little bit more designing part, and also how can we involve so like the system, the government, to take up this as a tool which can be scale all over India. But one thing I wanted to thank you, British Asian Trust and the other partner, that something has started on the target-based financing. So which is I take as a positive thing as a Pratham InfoTech Foundation.
Okay. Finally, I'm coming to a close. So I want to ask you two things. One thing I cannot... my audience would want to know, all my guests, on what they're reading, what are some of the recommendations that they make. Personally, Pankaj sir, what are you reading? What would you recommend people out there to read or get inspired or do something in development? What are you reading currently, or what do you get inspired by?
Well, I did a lot of reading in my earlier phase when I was an academician. Now I like to learn from good people. Like I'll go and visit Prem's program and learn from there. So currently, I am more in the stage of learning from the practitioners, learning from my children, learning from the practice, than from the reading alone. So that has been sort of my focus for the last decade or so. And reading, of course, is critical.
Okay. What are you reading? What is that one recommendation, your favorite book so far?
I'm reading more actually scholarly papers than the books, to be honest, because the level at which I have come to after many years of sort of research, etc., I probably read more the research papers or specialized papers than the books, basically.
You're reading about education, scholarly papers on education?
For example, many years back, we had done a research study by using computer-aided learning. So I would really focus read the papers on the kind of topics that we are interested in. and I don't find many books at the moment catering to my specific concern and the questions. I find specific papers are the one which probably give me more insightful
Fantastic,
information.
fantastic, guys. I agree with sir, because if you're deeply into research, you better go to university papers or research papers, because that's more nuanced rather than a book which is more commercial. Very well said, sir. Prem, your final thoughts. What are you reading currently? What do you get inspired by? What do you recommend our audience to read or even get inspired by? Go on.
So just as Pankaj mentioned, the same thing. So basically, I'm into also reading the research paper, and Assar is just published in the month of January, and it has the all over India report about education. So considering the new year coming, academic year coming, so we are very closely as a team, not as a person, but as a team, we are reading and understanding what are the development in education is happening. So I would suggest everybody, those who are actually wanted to make difference in the education sector, should read thoroughly the refer Assar report, where we have reached and where we want to go. So that is the one area I wanted to suggest people. I also gain because personally I gain a lot because of the Assar report. We are able to set target where we are and where we wanted to go. So that kind of thing actually help us to actually set targets. So it's very closely to development impact bond. To set your target, Assar is there.
Okay, I'm so happy to have done this with all of you, and therefore great to see two partners who have made impact in India with the British Asian Trust. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gyan Shala, and this is Pratham InfoTech Foundation. I will have them again because the knowledge of these gentlemen is so vast that it requires us to visit the subject of education in a different podcast. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vishal, and thank British Asian Trust for getting us involved in this initiative.